Hi, I'm Andy Hedgecock and I'd like to talk about the horrors and indeed the necessities of infodumping. What is infodumping and why might it be a problem? It's what happens when writers allow technical detail to choke a story rather than letting it emerge in more subtle and manageable ways. Most of the time, readers will avoid writers who don't avoid infodumping, but there is a notable exception, and it's this guy, Dan Brown. In the Da Vinci Code, the location, accomplishments, and values of Robert Langdon, Professor of Religious Symbology at Harvard, are blasted at us for 3 pages as Langdon muses on the following. Let me read. His plush Renaissance hotel bedroom with Louis XVI furniture, hand-frescoed walls, and a colossal mahogany 4-poster bed. A jacquard bathrobe hanging on his bedpost and bearing the monogram Hotel Ritz, Paris. He's wealthy, he's in Paris. A crumpled flyer for his own event at the American University of Paris. He's accomplished, and he's in Paris. A telephone call that announces an important visitor, triggers memories of the previous year, and, a bit implausibly, elicits verbatim recall of the sycophantic introduction to Langdon's talk of the previous evening. It's daft, it depends on Langdon waking up and not really realising where he is, and it's utterly tedious. Infodumping happens in all genres because writers sometimes have to tell as well as show to enable readers to understand complex character motivation and novel and complex settings. There's special pleading in relation to this in science fiction and fantasy because invented ecosystems, cultures, and technologies all require a bit more of a detailed explanation. It's always possible to get information across without dumping, however, and I'd like to consider a few positive examples of this, beginning with Mikhail Bulgakov's book, The Master and Margarita. In Bulgakov's opening chapter, we learn about Masalit, the Moscow Writers' Union. We learn about Stalin's top-down control of the arts and the bureaucracy surrounding that. We learn about the Soviet Union's official policy of atheism in the 1930s, and all this is done with a very light touch. There are sort of small, palatable morsels of information, all embedded in an interaction with an eccentric and interesting stranger. Because Bulgakov trusts his readers, it's a good illustration of the principle that less is more. Here's another example. You can use an omniscient narrator if the voice is witty and playful enough. The opening chapter of Alfred Bester's science fiction classic, The Star's My Destination, does infodumping in style, blatant but playful. We learn about interplanetary warfare, about rapid technological progress, and about the swarming galactic populations of the 24th century. This, Bester tells us, was an age of extremes, a fascinating century of freaks, but nobody loved it. It's infodumping, but it's entertaining. Another approach is to use an uninformed outsider to pose literal and factual questions. This is what Sir Arthur Conan Doyle does in the Sherlock Holmes stories, using Dr. Watson. Max Barry's approach is to do exactly the opposite and introduce an expert outsider to be interrogated by one of the main characters. Barry's version of this provides a useful overview of multiple worlds theory, but does it against the backdrop of an excruciating social interaction. And what's more is he doesn't introduce any abstract ideas until we've made enough investment in the story and in the characters to tolerate a brief physics lesson. As a young assistant stage director, the actor Timothy West wrote a play called This Gun That I Have in My Right Hand Is Loaded. It's a satire of over-explanatory dialogue in radio drama. I'll read a few segments. I've just been reading about the Oppenheimer smuggling case. Good gracious, it's nice to sit down after that long train journey from the insurance office in the city. Whiskey, eh? That's a strange drink for an attractive, auburn-haired girl of 29. You're my wife, Laura. Whatever it is, you can tell me. I'm your husband. Why, we've been married, let me see. 8 years, isn't it? It's daft, but it's a compelling demonstration that infodumping isn't okay just because it's embedded in dialogue. So, finally, I'd like to suggest an activity. Pick a piece of your own writing and highlight every sentence where you're telling rather than showing, and where there's no activity or behaviour. And then, for each sentence, if it appears in the introductory section, consider moving it. If you can embed it in an interaction, then embed away. If it's a lengthy sentence, consider paring it down to the absolute essentials. And if it does nothing in terms of moving the story along or increasing the reader's understanding of the story, seriously consider deleting it. Okay, thanks for watching, said the 61-year-old, £156 freelance writer who enjoys walking his Staffordshire Bull Terrier, listening to Joni Mitchell and wasting his money on Nottingham Forest season tickets. Cheers.